Hello, scholars. I hope that this week is finding you well. I wanted to talk to you a little bit in general about the way this class operates to give you some insight towards our first major writing assignment, the literacy narrative number 1. So first of all, the way UCF composes their first year writing program is very different than the way most universities do Composition 1 and Composition 2, which is actually a really good thing. So a lot of the time, you're going to have these classes be like, read Shakespeare and then give me a theme, Shakespeare, Moby Dick, Canterbury Tales, I don't know, maybe you have somebody progressive and you do something like, more contemporary, like, some Eudora Welty or something, or Flannery O'Connor. But typically it's like, read some literary piece and then write to me a theme that you're seeing and point to evidence of that theme in the particular paper. That's great if you want to go into a career of literary analysis. However, for the 99% of you that aren't planning on a career in literary analysis, it doesn't really serve much of a purpose for you to know how to be well-versed in writing about a theme in a piece of literature, right? That doesn't help you if you're a biologist or an engineering student or, insert any other career besides literary analysis there, right? So instead, UCF is one of the few schools that's actually like piloting this shift in the way that Composition 1 and 2 is taught. It was spearheaded by a woman by the name of Elizabeth Wardle, who used to be the department chair at UCF a couple of years ago, and has since gone on to, I think she's at University of Ohio. But anyway, a couple of leading scholars in the field of writing studies said, it's not really helping the 99% of everybody else that isn't going to major in literature to know how to write a theme. So how can we revamp the first year writing program to best serve all of the students, give all of the students skills that they might need as they progress in their academic careers? Henceforth, they did some work and adopted what's considered a writing about writing curriculum. So you're both reading texts that are about the act of writing, and then you're writing papers about the act of writing, okay? So for ENC 1101, this is starting with some foundational reflection of thinking about who you are as a writer, what has gotten you to this point as a writer. And then if you can understand who you are as a writer and what your strengths and weaknesses are as you are right now, like what do you know how to do, and then how can you apply that to other situations, that's much more helpful than demonstrating for me that you can write about a theme in Canterbury Tales, right? So for this class, our focus is going to be looking inward and thinking about how have we arrived at our disposition about writing right now? How have we arrived to feel about writing the way that we do at this moment as scholars, right? As blossoming scholars. K through 12 is something that the state requires you to do, right? That's all you're required to do in terms of the state and the country is finish K through 12. After that, it's up to you. So if you have decided to go into college, undergraduate classes, that means that you're transitioning from being a student into being a scholar, because scholars are people that work in academia, and academia is college. It's all interrelated. So you're no longer writing to please the FCAT or the SAT grader, or if you're not from Florida and you do the FCAT, whatever it is that you had where you are. I know like in New York it's the Regents. But like, it's a shift in the way you're thinking about writing, okay? Because you're no longer just writing to check the box that I have accomplished this thing to satisfy the requirements of the state and the country so I can move on to the next thing. Instead, you're now in the arena of people that are actively learning and studying about their areas of interest, in a very real way. Most of your professors are people that are currently researching and writing about whatever they teach is their area of, usually their area of expertise. Most of your professors are currently reading and writing about, or researching and writing about things that they are studying, that they do. That's their field of interest, that's their area of expertise. So you are amongst people that are actively constructing writing and research to a very specific goal that is more about like the progression of an academic conversation and community than being able to say I got a 10 out of 10 check, or I got an 80, I passed, whatever it may be. So there's a big shift, right? So that's really good if you hated writing the 5-paragraph essay, right? So I said that you had to think about where you are as a writer right now, and I asked you to do that in the week 1 academic engagement activity. Part of your post was saying, like, how do you feel about writing right now and why, right? And I'm not gonna lie, like, and it's not a bad thing. There are many of you that are like, I really don't like writing. That's totally okay. You don't have to. In fact, most writers will tell you that writing is really, really hard. It's perfectly acceptable to understand that struggle and to be like, yeah, this is hard. Writing is hard, but writing is also not perfectible, meaning no matter how much you work at it, there's always more that can be done to it, which is great. That means that you need a starting off point is all you need. You need that first jump in to start off and be like, okay, I got that first draft out of the way. Now let me go back and take a look at it and see where I can improve, as opposed to putting this pressure on yourself to draft the perfect piece of writing, as the deadline is looming. I am familiar with the school of 11:59 submit and maybe say a prayer, right? Like, oh, I'm my most genius when I've got 10 minutes left before I have to turn this in online, or the class will lock me out of the assignment. So I'm a genius right now. Like, I can't believe the words they're flowing through me, and you're like frantically writing. I've been there, we've all been there. But what UCF's first year program should teach you, a core foundational belief, is that writing's difficult. Writing is not perfectible, meaning you can always improve upon it. And that writing is not universal, meaning being able to write the perfect literary theme is not going to necessarily mean you can write the perfect everything else. Doesn't mean you're going to write perfect lab posts, perfect discussion posts, perfect resumes, perfect tweets, perfect comments in Reddit, perfect comments in YouTube, perfect birthday cards, perfect grant applications. Like, just because you're good at one thing doesn't mean you're good at all of them. But that also means that if you can figure out what you are good at, you can then say, okay, I know my strength is, maybe my strength is that I'm good at connecting with my reader through like personal anecdotes, right? I'm not so great at making like good connections to secondary sources, but I'm good at writing that introduction where I can engage with the reader and say, like, this is what happened to me, or this is my point of view, and like kind of get that hook, right? So maybe that's what you're good at. So then you're like, okay, I've got that part down. Now I need to focus at making connections to secondary sources, that type of thing. But what it does mean is that it'll also teach you to examine when you need to engage in an act of writing. Okay, what is this act of writing asking me for? Who is my audience? Is it my professor? Is it my peers? Is it my boss, right? Like, you would write a birthday card. Think about if you wrote a birthday card to an elder relative, like a grandma or somebody like that, a boss, and your best friend. And think about how different the messages would be in each of those birthday cards, right? Doesn't mean that you're perfect at writing birthday cards. It means that you're good at realizing that there are certain types of language and choices in the way that we're writing, given the situation, that are applicable to be successful in that moment. Now, if we think about the way that I asked you to consider using someone else's writing, you would also think about the birthday card you choose for your boss, your elder family member, and your best friend, right? Chances are you're not going to buy the same type of birthday card to give to your grandma that you would to give to your best friend. Maybe you have like the coolest grandma ever. Picture a not cool grandma, okay? Like maybe you have like a not cool aunt or somebody like that who's really like uptight, or an uncle or whoever. Someone that just sees things very differently than you and that wouldn't share in your sense of humor the way that a birthday card for your best friend would. So we're thinking about not only, okay, what am I good at? What have I done? What kind of writing have I accomplished? Or how do I feel about writing right now? How do I choose other pieces of writing to act for me, and why? Okay, so let's bring this back around from the class in general to the literacy narrative that you have to write. So I asked you last week to do some readings. I asked you to engage in your expressions of literacy, where you told me about something that you shared through social media. And when I say social media, that can include not just Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, but also like YouTube. The comment section is YouTube, Reddit. I'm sure you can all come up with some other things. I guess Tumblr would be something if any of you are still using Tumblr. I don't mean to like be controversial. I know some of you still love it and some of you are like, ew, Tumblr. But basically, somewhere that you're using someone else's words and you're putting a message out into the world, right? I'm asking you to do electronically right now because we're pretty much all kind of in isolation right now. So our main method of communicating to the world, for the most part right now, is through some sort of internet interface, right? Whatever it may be. Maybe it's somebody posted about messaging in like for a game, okay? But where you would have chosen someone else's idea to represent you as a writer, as an individual. So you had that expressions of literacy activity. You had the reading synthesis, where I asked you to engage some ideas that spoke to you from those readings. And you had your activity where you had to both tell me a little bit about yourself and tell me like how you feel about writing right now. So the literacy narrative, if you look at Ann Zeldua's How to Tame a Wild Tongue, is really kind of like taking a snapshot and then of a moment in time and then explaining it about your views on writing at this particular moment. So I had a conversation with a student about this yesterday. Think of this paper more like a journal entry where you use secondary sources and outside data to like make your journal entry than a 5-paragraph essay. So I said a few minutes ago, if you hate the 5-paragraph essay, this is great. It's a chance for you to break away from that 5-paragraph essay forever, or at least for this class. That's good and it's bad. It's good in that if you hated writing 5-paragraph essays, cool. You don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to come up with an introduction that's like, butterflies are beautiful. They like to eat wildflowers. Butterflies are important to the environment because blah, blah, blah. In this paper, I'm going to explain why protecting butterflies is so important for us as human beings. And then paragraph 1's like, I said butterflies are beautiful. Here's my example of that. And then your second paragraph, I said butterflies are whatever I said at this point, I don't remember, et cetera, et cetera. And then the conclusion being, butterflies are beautiful, important in the environment, blah, 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 blah. That's not what you're doing here. So instead, what I'd like you to consider is, first, you told me how you feel about writing right now. Why? Was there something that happened to you? Was there a moment that you can think about, an assignment or some particular moment where you had to write something that made you or broke you of your feelings about writing? Like either you're like, okay, I got this, I love this, I wrote this poem when I broke up with my significant other and I was so angry and heartbroken and it was the most beautiful piece of writing and I realized that writing could allow me to express myself. Or I tried really hard to write this assignment. It was in my 10th grade class, et cetera, and even though it doesn't matter how hard I tried, I didn't quite understand what the teacher wanted because I put all this work in and I didn't do well on it anyway, right? You can find one of those moments. Think about Ann Zeldua telling us like about being at the dentist and how That's like her frame for allowing us into her view of writing right now, right? So pick one of those moments that caused you to have the opinion you constructed or what you relayed to me in your academic engagement activity when you told me how you feel about writing right now. Develop that. And you can certainly write in the first person for this assignment. This is your literacy narrative. It is completely acceptable and expected in this particular type of writing to use the first person because you're telling your story, and it's like kind of creepy and weird if you refer to yourself in the third person, right? So we don't want to do that. All right, so you're starting with that literacy, that moment, right? Then you connected with those readings that I assigned you. I told you to find some points that jumped out to you, that spoke to you for some particular reason. Expand upon that. Make connections between how that moment from your, how that moment that made you feel about writing got you, where you are now. Then bring in those secondary sources. And then transition all of that into what you chose as your artifact to represent you as a writer when you're using someone else's words, and why. Based on both your experience that shaped the way that you're writing, or your thoughts, your feelings about writing, the way secondary sources are connecting to those feelings, and then how you chose to use in a particular occasion something that was not constructed by you to represent your thoughts and feelings. So your what was it about that act of writing that exists as this artifact that aligns with that literacy narrative that you have developed and explained to us through your thoughts on how about writing now, those sources that you're connecting to in that act, okay? So I hope that clears up a little bit how the literacy narrative acts and breathes. Be sure to review the Ann Zaldua piece and the other samples that I suggested. There's some student samples that I linked to in Stylus, which is the UCF first year writing publication. So take a look at those, consider what I have said, and know that everything in this class is going to build off of the stuff that we've done. So week 2's activities are going to be built into or built upon the understanding we created and the assignments we've done, even like little assignments in week 1. I'm not giving you any assignments that don't ultimately lead into your bigger assignments, whether it's like having you start to consider some ideas or begin grappling with and processing and synthesizing. Nothing I have you do is going to be like a one-off that you're not going to ever consider it again. Everything is going to help you as we progress and build and build and build. So it helps knowing that we only have 6 weeks. I know there's a lot to try to manage and work through in a 6-week period. I encourage you to please come to my virtual office hours if you are not sure about an assignment, if you're not sure about your understanding of a reading, if you just want to say hi and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about, is this okay? Whatever it is, I'm here for you. Think about the fact that when you signed up for this class, we were scheduled to see each other face to face 4 days a week for almost 2 hours a day. It was an hour and 50-minute class, 4 days a week. Now think about the fact that I would have been there with you all those days, talking about these concepts, making sure, guiding you, directing you. What I have developed for our web course is meant to get you there without me being like your cheerleader from the side, but I think you'd almost have to be not human to not need to check in with me at some point and clarify your understanding on something, okay? Because even if you have friends that have taken this class in other semesters, every professor's assignments vary a little bit. And because this is a 6-week concentrated intensive class, it's going to be very different probably from what any of your friends have taken in other classes at UCF, okay? So again, I'm here. I'm happy to talk to you. That's what I'm here for. And I don't want you to feel like you're alone on this journey, even though we're not meeting face to face. Like, I am happy to either talk to you during office hours, or if you want to make an appointment and speak with me, I'm happy to do that as well. But just know that we're building, right? So I'm not asking you to come up with anything brand new that you haven't already considered, at least in your minor assignments. I will say, please don't just copy and paste stuff that you've already written. Like, make sure that it's synthesized into one cohesive thing. You know, if there's a sentence or two that you like love the way that you wrote about it, of course you can do that, but make sure that there's a flow to the paper that looks like I can tell you didn't just copy and paste stuff in. And then finally, so the good part is, if you hated that 5-paragraph essay, that's no longer the case. The downside of that, I'm not going to say the bad part, but the inverse of that, okay, is that when you're encountering new types of writing, this is a documented thing. I can give you sources if you want them. There's going to be an automatic pushback when you're writing in ways that you're unaccustomed to, right? It's not that it's scary, it's just that it's unknown, and your brain is going to be like, is this what we're supposed to be doing? I don't know. Is this, are we doing this right? So while there is a bit of a struggle, and you're going to have to push yourself to engage and really write in these new types of writing, the plus side is that when you come out of this class, you will have learned so much more than just like improving upon a 5-paragraph essay, right? When you go against those intensive moments of like, I don't understand this pushback internally, when you overcome them, you really do actually learn a lot more in that process than you would have just by kind of engaging in stuff that you know already, or you were already good at and you're just like kind of building upon, okay? All right, that's my little lecture to you. I meant to keep that a little bit shorter, I'm sorry, but I wanted to make sure that you have a good understanding of what we're doing for this paper. Talk to me if you have questions. Thanks, guys.